Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going on an adventure to explore the very ground we stand on. We're talking about the mountains, the plateaus, and the plains that, believe it or not, do so much more than just shape our world. They actually shape our lives. Just take a look at this. Our planet's surface isn't just static. It's not a flat canvas. It's more like a living, breathing sculpture. Every single one of these shapes, these landforms, it's like a chapter in Earth's epic story, telling us about incredible forces and just mind-boggling amounts of time. And this idea of a living landscape, it's definitely not new. There's this ancient hymn to the earth from the Atharva Veda that puts it perfectly. For thousands of years, we've seen ourselves not as the owners of the land, but as its children. Okay, so with all this variety out there, how do we even begin to make sense of it all? Well, geographers have helped us out. They generally group landforms into three main types. You've got your mountains, your plateaus, and your plains. For our trip today, we're going to be focusing on the highest of the high, the mountains and plateaus. So what exactly is a landform officially? It's basically any natural physical feature on the planet's surface. But here's the really cool part and the thing to remember. They are not permanent. They're part of this incredibly slow, super powerful drama of uplift and erosion. They're always in motion. All right, let's start climbing. Our first stop takes us to what are probably the most dramatic landforms of them all, the incredible mountain ranges of the world. So what actually makes a mountain a mountain? Well, it really comes down to a mix of height and shape. First, it has to be way higher than everything around it. And then you've got the classic look, a really wide base, super steep slopes, and then that narrow summit or peak at the very top. And I mean, mountains are everywhere. They're a truly global thing, with famous ranges on every single continent. So how about we do a quick whirlwind tour and check out some of the most famous peaks out there? First stop, the Himalayas. These are the absolute titans of Asia. Over here, you see the one and only Mount Everest, literally the highest point on our planet. And right next to it, the stunning Kanchenjunga, the third highest. I mean, this is truly the roof of the world. Okay, now let's jump thousands of miles away to Europe, where the Alps are topped by the beautiful, snow-covered Mont Blanc. And then, poof, we're in South America, looking at the mighty Aconcagua in the Andes. Fun fact, that's the highest peak you'll find anywhere outside of Asia. And what's so amazing is just how different they all are. You've got these lonely volcanic giants like Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, just bursting up from the flat plains. And then you have something completely different, like the lush green peaks of Anamudi in the Western Ghats of South India. So get this, mountains actually have a life cycle. Seriously. You have young ranges, like the Himalayas, which are super tall and pointy because, well, they're still growing, still being pushed up. But then, give it a few 100 million years, and even the biggest mountains get worn down by wind and rain. They end up shorter, more rounded, kind of like the really ancient Aravalli Range in India. Wow. Okay, this chart, this really puts it all in perspective, doesn't it? When you see all these famous peaks lined up like this, you get a real sense of their insane scale. And look at Mount Everest, way up at the top. It just completely dwarfs everything else. It really shows you what they mean by the roof of the world. Okay, so that's the geology, the what of the mountains. But what about the who? What about life? Let's shift gears and look at how plants, animals, and especially people have figured out how to not just survive, but actually thrive on these incredibly steep and challenging slopes. And that really brings up a huge question, right? When you think about it, the crazy terrain, the thin air, the brutal weather, how in the world does anyone manage to actually live there? And make no mistake, the challenges are enormous. Living in the mountains means you're always dealing with the threat of nature. We're talking about the sudden horror of avalanches and landslides, the sheer force of flash floods and cloudbursts, not to mention the crushing heavy snow and just bone-chilling cold. But people are incredibly clever, right? To deal with all that, they came up with some brilliant solutions. They literally carved steps or terraces into the steep slopes so they could farm. They learned to herd tough animals like yaks that can handle the altitude. And today, they've even built entire economies around tourism, everything from skiing and hiking to important religious pilgrimages. And this connection people have with mountains, it goes way beyond just survival. For as long as we can remember, mountains have had this powerful spiritual meaning for us. I mean, think about it. Over 1,500 years ago, the great poet Kalidasa wasn't just describing the Himalayas as a bunch of rocks. He called them a living god, the Lord of Mountains. And that spirit of taking on these massive challenges, both literal mountains and personal ones, you can see it in modern heroes too. Take Bachendri Pal. She was the very first Indian woman to climb Mount Everest. Just an amazing feat. But the story doesn't stop there. Decades later, she became an inspiration for Arunima Sinha. Now, Arunima had a terrible accident and lost her leg. But with Pal's encouragement, she didn't just climb Everest, she climbed the highest peak on every single continent. If that's not a testament to the human spirit, I don't know what is. You know, this deep respect is baked right into the names themselves. To the local people, it's not Mount Everest. They call it Chomolungma, which means Mother Goddess of the World, or Sagamatha, Goddess of the Sky. These aren't just labels on a map, you guys. They represent a whole way of seeing the world. All right, so we've been up to the pointy peaks. Now let's head over to a different kind of high-altitude landscape, the huge, flat-topped areas we call plateaus. So what exactly is a plateau? The easiest way to think about it is like a mountain that's had its top chopped clean off. So it's a piece of land that shoots up from its surroundings, often with really steep sides, but instead of a pointy peak, it's got a big, more or less flat surface on top. A tableland, basically. And don't think these are small. Plateaus can be absolutely gigantic. Take the Tibetan Plateau. Its average height is 4,500 meters. To give you some perspective, that is higher than most of the mountains in the entire Alps. It is this massive, high-altitude world all on its own. It's no wonder they call it the roof of the world. So, we've seen how the actual shape of the ground can determine everything about how and where life can even exist. So, let's wrap this up. Let's bring it all home. Why does any of this really matter? And that really is the key takeaway here. These landforms, they aren't just pretty scenery for our lives. No, they are active players in our story. They affect our weather, they shape our cultures, they push us to be creative. Which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. How does the landscape where you live shape who you are?